usually the number of people on this call is too big to do self-intros in person, but we do encourage you to introduce yourself via the chat room. And while a few more people are joining, I'm just going to real quickly share my screen. Go. There we go. I even figured out, Jessica, how to get the meeting chat window up here. Not that it'll be that easy to monitor, but I'll give it a shot. So what I wanted to do this round, and sorry, I have my tech giving me things to do here. What I wanted to do for this month is be a little bit more open in terms of the conversation. The last several have been very programmed in terms of content around specific topics. And because of some recent events, I wanted to just have this, and because I like to mix it up a little bit on these monthly calls, I will sometimes throw a topic in here that can be a little bit more open-ended, kind of let the conversation go to where the participants want it to go. But it also helps to have a theme. So the theme for this one is, what's keeping you up at night from a healthcare interoperability or healthcare integration perspective. That can cover a lot of territory. And I'm hoping that will spur some back and forth discussion. And I see that Philip is asking, will we provide a copy of the recording for this meeting? The answer is yes, as well as the slide deck. Even though I don't have a ton of content, I do have some. So yes, we will share the content of the meeting, because I recognize the day and time don't always work for everyone. And I'm seeing some additional people hopping on here. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Keith, great to see you. Keith's one of our customers with Indiana HIE. Love to see some of our customers here. I think also Mia with Remits is joining, and I appreciate you putting your organization in there. Martin, good to see you. Philip, great to see you. All right, so let's talk about a couple of stressful things that have been keeping me up at night, and then I'll want to hear from you. So certainly one of the big ones that's happened in the last 30 days or so that impacts healthcare interoperability specifically is NextGen's recent announcement that they are closed sourcing the open source version of Mirth Connect that's been available, I think, since 2006. It's been a really long journey. Some of you may know that a number of people on the Zen team actually came from Mirth originally. So we definitely, have a special feeling about Mirth Connect, and we know and certainly recognize that it's had just a hugely positive impact on the industry. I think many data integration engineers learned how to do healthcare data integrations using this tool. So it's a big deal. So we kind of had been expecting that here at Zen. We had no inside information ahead of time, just FYI. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Zen's perspective on this situation and kind of what our advice is to folks. The other thing that is creating a little bit of stress for me in particular, because of my close association with the national networks, I'm a huge proponent and advocate of TEFCA, which many of you know if you've been on this call or heard or watched some of my office hours in the past. And they just had the recognized coordinating entity, which is the Sequoia Group, just had to cancel their third straight informational kind of TEFCA monthly update call. And this has happened since the Trump administration took over. And, you know, obviously busy getting their ducks in a row when it comes to some of these projects and initiatives. So it's just creating a lot of uncertainty, which is a little bit distracting from a national network perspective. And then the third thing that's happening is we are doing a lot of work. I am on the Carrier Quality Advisory Council, and we are doing a lot of work in our Carrier Quality Advisory Council, and we have formed some work groups, and those work groups are working with the steering committee for carrier quality to look at how we can better align with TEFCA. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means. Again, some of you have probably heard me talk about the alignment topic, but what I think I can do for this call is zero in a little bit more on what is coming soon as opposed to later. And that might help people just, you know, I think sometimes knowledge is power when we're stressed out about something or there's a lot of uncertainty. But what I'd like to do now is open it up to anyone who, by the way, feel free to turn. I see Martin has done so. That's great. Feel free to turn on your camera, unmute yourself, and let me know if you have a topic or you have something that's keeping you up or that you're worried about. Happy to throw it on our agenda here for discussion.
Marilee, the RCE contract, I've heard rumors that they actually canceled the RCE contract. Is there any truth to that?
Martin, I heard the same rumor. I've also heard rumors that this is just about a communications blackout that's still in effect for all things falling underneath HHS. So I heard the rumor. I have been assured by certain people that hasn't happened, but those people I can't tell you are people who they're not, you know, it's not people from the RCE. So I have heard from people who are close to the RCE, meaning, you know, they have some interactions with the RCE. So I think, Martin, we just have to consider that right now a rumor. It feels to me that if that had actually happened, we would have notice of that, like there would be information forthcoming from the Sequoia project, because if the contract had been canceled, one would think they would now be free to talk about what's going to come next. But I'll open it up. Has anyone else on this call heard any additional information beyond this rumor that the RCE contract was canceled?
So it almost seems too much to be coincidental that there sort of seems to be new life being breathed into carrier quality.
Well, yeah, Martin, I'm with you, but I will tell you the alignment with TEFCA discussion started in October and November of last year. So before even the election, the Carrier Quality Steering Committee and Advisory Council had already agreed that the recently published, especially those TEFCA SOPs that were published kind of between August and November, that we wanted to align with TEFCA. And that was real as much as possible. And that really was driven by the issue that happened last year between two implementers where, you know, trust became an issue under carrier quality. And that, you know, that allowed TEFCA, the QHINs, to kind of put their heads together and try to make some policies to try to kind of be, you know, prevent those kind of problems from happening under TEFCA. And so carrier quality had already decided that we would be doing this alignment exercise this year. So I know for sure that in itself isn't an indication that something has happened with TEFCA, but I think it's also a true statement that carrier quality fast tracking and alignment provides an important backstop. And I do believe that carrier quality, and of course, I'm not a genius, this is logical, with over 1.2 billion documents being exchanged today in the carrier quality network, it is completely logical that especially if we're aligning and taking those lessons learned from the TEFCA work that has been done between the QHINs, that it makes sense that carrier quality would be the potential, alternative, because it already exists, it's already working. We just need to fill in some gaps. And I'm definitely want to talk about some of those gaps here in just a few minutes. But I think your point is well taken. But definitely don't have anything definitive to share on that other than the rumors. Anyone else have any further comments around TEFCA or just anything else? Want to throw another topic out here for discussion. If not, I'll move on, but I'm going to keep coming back.
Marilee, sorry.
Oh, good. Hyro, yeah, go for it.
Yes. So, I'm the technical starter of Guardian Health Services. So I'm mostly concerned with what's coming, what technical changes are coming. Like I understand what TEFCA is from a standpoint of what is the purpose and everything else. But how do we know if like it seems to me like every 2 or 3 years, the technology changes. Um, we've gone through the long road of implementing something that was just organization to organization communication to going through some gateway that was standardized at some point using Connect open source, and now that has even gone through. I mean, has been discontinued, and then now we have the hub, and then a lot of the little offices and things like that are kind of being left out, as they don't have like the resources like, for example, our practices have, and the partnership with Sen, obviously. Now that it's going to change, I know that like us as customers, we started as implementers of those adapters and things like that that communicate with the hub. But we see that the change is happens so rapidly that it makes to us, we're thinking about making the change to just use the APIs, for example, of Send, because you guys are already more focused on those changes than
Right.
we can be. And the reality is that it's a benefit to the demographics, and I'm going to tell you why. Because while we're handling this part of, we are at the same time be able to take care of these projects that are going to benefit the patients and the healthcare providers, by incorporating the certain things in AI, following, hospitals, doing hospital follow-ups of the patients with their own providers and things like that. So my thoughts is always that, like, every time that with this the health exchange or the national board decides to make a change, I know there's some people that will fall back, right? Because now they have to spend 2 or 3 years trying to figure out the technology, which is not all the time best documented.
Yeah. Those are all really excellent points, and you covered a lot of territory. So let me just summarize a couple of key points. No, I think they're all great though. So which is great. So first of all, for those of you who don't know, we tend to talk a lot about carrier quality and TEFCA and even Commonwealth, and I'm not always pulling it back to the other big network, which is eHealth Exchange. So when our technology works across all three of those networks, and yes, because of that, we have to monitor those technical changes and be constantly monitoring it and building that into our next releases. So a good example is for those of you who may have experienced this earlier in 2024, eHealth Exchange, because of some of the TEFCA requirements that are kind of flowing downhill to the networks. And eHealth Exchange, of course, is a TEFCA participant as a QHIN, just like Commonwealth is. They started making changes to key technical aspects of the system. And then one of the first ones was this thing they called OPP 17, and it really was a SAML header change. And that the SAML is a technical problem. The business problem that TEFCA wanted to solve, and that now the rest that this is now flowing down to the other networks, is we want to have better clarity around who is asking for information, meaning, okay, you know, Zen is a gateway, a validated gateway on eHealth Exchange. Guardian is using Zen's technology. Guardian is providing access to a group of providers, but who are the providers? And in Guardian's case, you know, you guys are a covered entity. And I know that was part of
Correct.
the conversation recently with eHealth Exchange. So what they're really trying to do is make sure they're getting to the covered entity level of who is asking for that data. So we have customers of ours that use our gateway that are not a provider group. They are another health tech vendor. And so they have provider customers. And so what really the networks want to understand is that I kind of think of it, because I come from the lab business, as the chain of custody. You know, we want to know who are all the parties in the middle of this transaction, from, you know, and if it's just pure technology, not necessarily, but certainly under Carey Quality and under Commonwealth, you know, who are the players, the stakeholders that are involved in enabling that connection, and ultimately who is the provider group that's asking for that data. And therefore, two major things are changing in order to make that happen. The first one is, well, we have to register those provider entities in the network directories, right? So a good example is, we have a number of customers that are health information exchanges. So they may represent 40, 50, 60 different, in some cases, many more provider organizations. But traditionally in a health exchange, they'd only been listed as CRISP or as Reliance eHealth Collaborative, VHIE, and nobody really knew who were the providers that were participating with Reliance or participating with CRISP or Indiana. And so that directory entry level detail is where the network is trying to go to, because in order to comply with TEFCA, because if you don't have it in the directory, then there's nothing for the SAML to kind of connect to, right? So we've got to tie the business problem together with the technical solution, and the directory. Having those children entries is what allows everyone to really have a better understanding of what providers are making queries on the network. And then, so, you know, we're seeing that while we're seeing individual networks make changes, almost everything is being driven from TEFCA flowing downhill, right? And so that's good, because a lot of these changes are very similar or even identical. And I can tell you that one of the things that Zen does on both the technical work groups and on the business work groups is really encourage as much harmonization as we possibly can get, because we don't want to have 3 different versions of our gateway with 3 different versions of the network, because each one has a different SAML requirement. or having to build out really complicated, you know, business logic. So, but it is an advantage, you know, to have a partner in that process, which I think you guys are looking at now, right, Jairo, in that, yes, if you use our API and we get away from kind of the custom integration that was done, you know, because it's existed for a long time, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
That will help protect you from those changes, because it shifts that responsibility to Zen, because it's just part of the core offering. But I think for other people, I think that the pain, the thing that makes it stressful, is that those changes at the business level and those changes at the technical level are happening. So, you know, it has to get the business folks' attention, it has to get the technical folks' attention, and what is the strategy when you have, you know, a evolving landscape of these requirement changes that are all kind of flowing out of TEFCA. So I want to talk a little bit specifically. We'll stay on this theme, and then I'll go back to the open source Mirth Connect issue. So couple things, and this kind of points to some of what Martin was talking about. You know, okay, we've had the last 3 calls, monthly calls canceled. Rumors are floating around about, you know, the RCE contract being canceled. But we also there's been some names floated for the leadership of ASTP ONC, and at least a couple of those names we know are very supportive over TEFCA. But of course, I don't think that any of that has necessarily been finalized yet. So again, the rumors are kind of competing with one another. What I do know anecdotally by talking with the QHINs themselves is they continue to work and collaborate together. So even though there's no news being released, there is work happening. The QHINs are working together. And so that, made me feel a little bit better. And I had some of those conversations at HIM. So that's just been in like the last 30 days. And then, like we talked about, obviously alignment with carry quality, the benefit of that is it does provide a good backstop, depending on what happens with TEFCA. So when we talk about aligning with TEFCA, what does that really mean? So what are the priorities? The priorities right now is we have a new on the behalf of / delegate of authority policy happening that should be published in mid-May. We just came out of a work group session on that. It is both a business and technical change. The business side is about proper vetting and approval of this on the behalf of or delegate of authority use case, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And then there's an associated, very similar with the concept of OPP 17, where we need to know that there is an OBO or delegate of authority relationship, and that information is going to be in the header so that we technically know that that scenario exists and where that particular entity's data lives, so that people asking for data can look to the right place. So that is requiring additional SAML header changes. They are allowing a window right now. The draft dates are that we would start testing in August as a community for the SAML changes, and it would go into production in September, roughly mid-August to mid-September. Again, the dates won't be finalized until the policy is released, and we expect the policy to be released early May. And then we can all we'll have the final technical specs and we'll have the final dates. And then for Zen, we have that already stubbed out, meaning we are preparing to start the development for a version of Stargate that will support that SAML header within that window. Let me talk real quick. Is there anyone here who doesn't know what, like, is this concept of on the behalf of or delegation of authority? Does anyone here kind of not know what that is and would like me to comment on that? Don't be shy. I just don't want to be repeating information that people are already familiar with, and you can feel free to write that in the chat. I can circle back on that. Just super high level. This is when you have a healthcare organization that has a primary EMR. I kind of think of it as the data home. It's where the data lives. But then they brought in another piece of technology that they're using to initiate queries on the network, all for a valid exchange purpose. But we have this issue where, well, wait, are we going to put them in the directory twice? How does that work? And if all I'm doing is initiating queries from this new piece of technology and I'm not adding any new clinical data, all I want to do is point people back to my home system, my home EMR, when they're asking for data. That's really what on the behalf of delegate of authority means at the highest level. There are some use cases where maybe you could have a delegate of authority status and have new data to add, in which case you would be initiating and responding. But what's important here is to understand why, entities might be registered in the directory more than once, and it's really just to clearly identify these special use cases. So that one is coming out first. It's the one that has the biggest business change. It's changing the responsibility and really putting the responsibility of the approval and the directory entry over on the actual healthcare organization themselves. So if I had Sutter Hospital and they are running Epic, and Sutter Hospital had one of their divisions or provider groups that bought this special technology to do some cool initiating queries from, Sutter would have to approve that. use case is a valid delegate of authority on the behalf of use case, and they would have to tell Epic, hey, we've authorized this use case. Here's the information. You need to put that in the directory. So it's kind of flipping the business model on its head, but I think it's putting the approval in the right place. And that's the healthcare entity that owns the data and who has bought this other piece of technology. Then the next one up, per the input that we got recently, is we will be looking at moving to this new definition that Tufka created called required treatment. It is a more objectively defined definition of treatment when you have a mandatory response involved. So under Tufka, you now have 2 possible treatment use cases. You have Tufka required treatment and you have just regular treatment. This required treatment has some special requirements on it, and it's a much better, well-defined definition of treatment, the providers that are eligible to make those required treatment queries, and then treatment still exists. And this is where really, why does treatment still exist? Why would anybody do anything other than require treatment? Well, because 2 parties may agree that a certain use case goes under treatment, and as long as it hits a general HIPAA definition of treatment, that's okay. They're just not going to, under Tufka, require all the other participants to respond to that particular query. They're only mandating response with this little yes here under required response if people are meeting this required treatment definition. And there's this, again, has a technical requirement and a business requirement. The technical requirement is you have to support some new exchange purposes, and not every gateway has the ability to easily move from. A lot of gateways were hard-coded with treatment only, and that's all they do. And they just blow up if you send anything other than treatment through as the exchange purpose. So this is requiring that people update their gateways in some cases. For Zen, it's just a matter of supporting the full range of Tufka or any other network exchange purposes. So that's, again, kind of part of our next upgrade, is to make sure that we can support all of the, validated exchange purposes across all the networks. And then there's a business requirement. The business requirement is very well documented under Tufka. And by the way, when we provide this deck, there are links. I highly recommend, whether you're a provider organization or you're a health tech vendor, and you really want to understand, well, what questions are being asked of new participants to validate that they are authorized to make a required treatment query. This vetting process is very well laid out. And really what it's doing, in my opinion, and some of you maybe heard me talk about this, is it's kind of giving an easy path for the traditional healthcare provider. I've got one right now that is an urgent care neurologist. It's kind of cool. Takes care of patients that are having severe migraines or other problems, or maybe they think it's a migraine, but what if it isn't a migraine, right? They can do that assessment in a brick and mortar urgent care setting that has the specialty focus of neurology. That's a brick and mortar provider. So it's pretty straightforward. We provide a copy of their NPI entry. We provide a copy of their Medicare or Medicaid entry, because you do need to be a covered entity type organization. And other than just making sure that, we're validating that, yes, the use case is the provider is seeing a patient and wants to pull their medical history because they need to have their clinical treatment recommendations informed by the full medical history of the patient. So obviously understanding that process is really important. The bar is higher for some new emerging healthcare delivery use cases, where we need a higher level of scrutiny. And a good example would be a telehealth group that's a big group of nurse practitioners. Well, what are they really doing? What services are they providing? Do they really fall under treatment? Are they having a real-time, direct interaction with the patient in some way? We want to know more about those kind of organizations because we want to make sure that someone's not trying to cheat the system and do an operational use case under a required treatment exchange purpose. And so that's what these vetting requirements are designed to uncover. So those are the things that we're working on first at Care Equality, and I think also under Commonwealth and eHealth Exchange. And again, we're hoping that there'll be a lot of harmonization. And considering that everyone is, there's all this cross-pollination. So Commonwealth and eHealth Exchange are well represented, in the governance of Care Equality. They are also both QHINs. And so I think the harmonization is kind of going to take care of itself to the extent possible. It is a different network. So it's possible that there are a few nuances of things that may not fit the TIFCA's doing that the other networks, may want to do. And we're trying to deal with those nuances as they come up. All right, I'm going to back up and go to, because this was mentioned earlier, the Mirth Connect closed sourcing news. So let me just give a quick overview on this, and then I'll pause for any questions or comments. The announcement that happened in the past few weeks by NextGen is that the last open source version that's being supported is the current release. It's currently available for download, 4.5.2 of Mirth Connect. The next version that will be released by NextGen is going to be called 4.6, and it will only be available under commercial license, which means you're going to have to pay if you want to keep moving up versions of Mirth Connect. We are also hearing, and this is just anecdotal, that their license prices are also going up a bit. So just things that are causing some pain for people. So what is happening in the marketplace in response to this? Well, as you can imagine, there are a lot of developers that rely on this tool that want it to live on. The project that Zen is supporting, and we're supporting them until they give us a reason not to, and right now they haven't, is the the Open Integration Engine Project, or OIE. I've got the link here. One of the things that we really like about this group and we think is important is we didn't want another open source that was directly tied to the fortunes of a company that had, maybe a different focus. And so, and we didn't want only one vendor being the supporting entity, because again, what happens if something happens to that vendor down the road? We just end up right back where we are now. And so what we like about this group is that, number one, we know they're founding engineers and we think they're good. They are actively recruiting additional sponsors and participants. And when I say sponsor, they're not even able to take money yet because they're still putting their nonprofit status together. But they do have a sponsors page, and they are asking us to do in-kind contributions and support, and stating publicly that we are supporting this effort. So that they can get some momentum behind them. And so there is a sponsors page. If you go to that site, I do encourage you to click on their sponsors link, and you can see the companies that are standing behind them. They got a pretty good sized list right out of the gate. And I think that's only going to grow here over the next 30 days. And I think they have a good strategy. We will be, as soon as they finalize their first official released version, we will be bringing that in-house to our Gemini application and reviewing it. We're going to be helping them do some vulnerability scanning. And we have a commitment that we will be evaluating it for use in our Gemini environment, because we do use the open source version of Mirth Connect right now. Now, for us, we are not particularly affected because we've always known that we had to be able to have our own fork so that we wouldn't be at the mercy of another company. So we have our own fork. We would like to be able to leverage the work of the open source group for feature ads and be able to contribute to an open source group. And so that's why we're going to make sure that we control our own destiny while also being supportive of the open source initiative. We have a lot of clients that do both. They have Gemini, they're using our branded version of Mirth Connect as an entry point into the rest of our integration platform services. It's a UI they're familiar with. They also have other Mirth Connects that do other things in their environment. We even have a Zen Insight channel monitoring tool that monitors all of that, whether they're hosting it or Zen is hosting it. And so we'd like to maintain that moving forward. And we think that the OIE group is going to allow us to do that. We also have 2 solutions that are specifically for Mirth Connect. Our plan is to keep our SSL extension and our Zen Insight product, working with the new OIE release so that people who are already using our SSL extension can just move over to OIE when they're ready to, if they want to maintain their open source capabilities, and they'll still be able to use those tools. So I'm going to pause here. Welcome to give me any anyone have feedback or comments on the closed sourcing of Mirth Connect? No one's stressing. All right, good. And if you think of a question, then drop it in the chat, please. That would be great. My biggest recommendation to folks is, you have time. That 4.5.2 version hasn't been out that long. I know people running much older versions of Mirth Connect than that. There is a window that you have to evaluate your options. I think for people who haven't already started building on top of the open source version, I think they are clearly looking for people like Zen and some others who do something similar that we do to kind of let us take the responsibility of that, not only do the infrastructure management, but maintain the code for them so they can just be focused on the integration use cases and using the tool. But I also think that there will be a viable open source solution long term. And we will continue to monitor. If people are aware of other groups that are not necessarily tied to a commercial company, I'm trying not to do a commercial for a commercial company. And by the way, it's the reason we didn't decide to open source it ourselves, because people ask us to, but we just felt like that wasn't in the best interest of the open source community, because now the open source initiative would be tied just to Zen's future, and we wanted we wanted this community to be sustainable long term, regardless of what happens to us or any one particular company.
So I have a question, Marilee. We use Mirth for many things. So this exchange of communication what is it going to be used for? Like, I'm trying to understand if this is something that we need to do, because we are using the latest open source version of Mirth, but I know that we use it for things like ENS notifications, labs, and things like that. Is this to be able to communicate via Mirth through the more national data, or?
So what you need to be aware of course, is there'll be no more releases coming out for
Okay, security will be a problem for sure.
Right. So security is your number one problem. The Open Integration Engine project is taking the 4.52 and they're forking it and they're creating their own release, and will be releasing that under open source license themselves. But because it's got that foundational component of Mirth Connect underneath the covers, it would be, all of your channels should just be able to, it should be no different than upgrading to 4.6 or any future next gen upgrade. It's just a different group of developers who will be taking that code, because they all run Mirth Connect too, right? So they all have to make sure that that the upgrade path from version to version is reasonable. And so it's just, they're going to be releasing their own branded fork, so that people like you can pick that up, and run with it if you don't want to write checks to next gen. Of course you have that option of writing checks to next gen. But I know for many companies, when you've built on an open source model, a paid model can break your business model, right? And we have customers who have had some of both, right? They have some stuff over here in our environment in Gemini, and they have some of their own, and they probably will be moving more over to us, but they already have a relationship with us. So that's certainly a path for you guys also, just to keep in mind, because you already have, Gemini and Stargate are kind of joined at the hips. And so, yes, you pay more if you're adding a whole bunch of other use cases because we need to give you more capacity because we're supporting more data flows. But technically that infrastructure exists. It's just scaling it up based on new use cases.
Perfect. That's great to hear. I'm glad I asked the question.
Yeah, you have options. I think that's the really good thing that I want everyone to understand.
And, in my experience, from what I've seen from organizations that have merit, including ours, that the ones that supervise the technology have come from the beginning and know how difficult it is to kind of work with merit, and or even try to find developers that are more geared towards merit on the healthcare side. Because it's one thing is to understand, from a code point of view, but you have to understand what this thing does, right? What the merit actually does. Because this is being used for a lot of things, and it does have a script inside that, that's very close to JavaScript, whatever, and then you even code against that. So it's like a double, you have to, number one, worry about this new versions and how it's going to break your existing setup, because that can happen too. So there's a lot of little pieces of this merge technology that can fail, and in that way it's scary for all the people that are using merge right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, that's where it kind of comes down on, put that responsibility in another organization, aka in the same way that you're doing that with Stargate for your eHealth
Right.
Exchange connection. But I think also the other side of that coin is all of those developers that are participating in the project, they have that same problem, right? So they can break it, they could put that pain on themselves. And so I think that that's why I think it's kind of, if I'm making a decision, I'm thinking I wouldn't make the decision to go to Zen just because of this. I would make that decision based on that and other factors, right? That may be causing pain, maybe be more costly. There is a TCO aspect of this when you're, I call it doing it yourself. I mean, we're HITRUST CSFR2 certified. It is expensive to take a Mirth Connect implementation and get that HITRUST CSFR2, seal on it. Now, some people have already invested that time and energy to do that, but it is one of the things that we've done. And, that actually in our environment is set up to mitigate some of those issues that Mirth Connect just has, that because it's a open source tool that's been around a long time, our infrastructure around it is designed to overcome those shortcomings. So that would be a reason why to consider doing a partner, something with a partner that's doing the hosting and the management of all of those pieces. But again, I don't think that this group, this open IE group, is going to cause any more problems with upgrades than what NextGen was causing when they would do theirs. There are always some, but it's a talented group of engineers. And I just think, Zen's perspective is, I mean, one could make the case that, well, the open source is competing with Zen. And we're like, no, when you're in the interoperability business, you collaborate. It's not about competition. And the reality is, so much innovation has come from the ability of this tool to be available. For developers coming right out of the gate and have an idea and need to learn. And so we just want to make sure that continues, to be available to the marketplace. Other comments or questions? Yes, Stephen.
I'm concerned about where we're going with the commercial extensions. Is Zen going to offer commercial extensions for SSL, for clustering, for message generation?
So we already do SSL. That's a commercial extension that we've offered for 4 years now, I think, and we do sell that to the open source community. And we are going to make sure that our SSL extension is compatible with the Open Integration Engine moving forward. We've not built some of those other extensions, and some of that is because we solve those problems in our own environment differently. One of the reasons why we created SSL is we needed it. And then we were like, okay, well, let's sell it to other people. Other people need it. We don't, the way we handle, we solve clustering based on our infrastructure. I don't need to use that the way they got in. I also know that clustering plugin caused a lot of headache for people and was a little
Oh, it's
difficult.
horrible. It's
Yeah.
horrible. It's
So-
horribly implemented.
Yeah.
It's very chatty.
Yeah, it's we think that the way our underlying infrastructure, which is quite mature, people are shocked when they see the complexity that we have, but the complexity that we have has created simplicity in this perspective that we're self-healing, where we can easily within minutes spin up new instances. We have a multi container, data flow. We kind of just baked the concept of clustering into our platform. We just don't think there's an easy way of doing that outside what we've spent 5 years or so, 6 years building. But there's other extensions that, I think, we will keep looking at, not just for, if we feel like we need it, but also as potential contributions to open source. So that's something we're constantly looking at. There's some other little tools we've created that, we are looking to go, okay, what might be a good thing to contribute? The SSL is a tough one because it is security related and there's so much, we invest a lot in the work that we do on the SSL extension. So that's a difficult one for us to open source just because of the cost involved.
Yeah, your pricing is still better than next gen.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot less expensive than next gens, and we're going to continue to look at that. We do want it to be affordable, right? We need to kind of make sure it's viable and sustainable on our part, but we like we say sometimes on LinkedIn, security shouldn't be expensive. So yeah, our Zen Insight product will definitely be we'll make sure that works with the Open Integration Engine project. It's pretty straightforward. It's a channel, and then it pushes the metadata with no PHI to us, and then we do the work in our environment. So it's very lightweight. In other words, it doesn't have a lot of dependencies on the integration engine itself. But those are both things that we're committed to maintaining. And I do recommend, Stephen, I don't know if you've gotten involved in that group, but your input on what extensions you think you really rely on, that would be great input to give to the group, to that community.
I intend to.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we are about 10 minutes till the top of the hour. I would, any other comments or questions? I'm just looking through my notes to see if there was anything else. Again, there's a lot of information in here that comes from another session I did, but we'll just leave that in there for those of you who are interested in TEFCA and some of these new requirements. It wouldn't hurt for you to have it at your fingertips. I think the last thing I'll mention here is my biggest concern about TEFCA losing some momentum is progress on individual access services, which is healthcare consumer access to their data through the national networks. Equality has had a lot of roadblocks thrown up to make patient request, or what is under TEFCA is called individual access services, a mandatory response. And so even though it's a supported use case, none of the people, none of the big EMRs that have the data are responding, at least under Care Equality. And so this is really one of the big motivations for TEFCA was, come on, we've got to make individual access to our health data easier than us having to log into 5 different portals. And while if you're young and healthy, you only have one and everything lives in my chart, if you're a little older like me, I see a lot of different doctors. They're not all in one my chart. So it can be very frustrating. So under TEFCA, IAS is a mandatory response, which is great. And we're starting to see some early success. And Commonwealth Health Alliance, which is one of the QHINs, has really been doing a great job of driving focus on individual access services adoption, both in their own network and, of course, as part of TEFCA. And in fact, they're asking all of their EMR participants, as they're moving over from their old technology onto the newer Commonwealth technology stack that's been out there for a year now, and I think they're getting everyone migrated as of, I think, July is their cutoff, is they're trying to get everyone to just automatically opt into individual access services, which means all those Cerner facilities, there's a bunch of ambulatory EMRs, Athena Health is a big one, would be, even with just the Commonwealth network, opted into individual access services. So I think that Commonwealth could be the backstop in the short run for individual access services if TEFCA loses some momentum. But I also think that if TEFCA really is a problem moving forward, then I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure on Care Equality to align with TEFCA around adopting the TEFCA individual access services SOP and making it a mandatory response. I do believe of all the alignment discussions going on, this will be the hardest. And I only think that's going to happen if TEFCA really, if we do find out that the RCE contract was canceled, which we certainly hope that's not true. But what I'm recommending to all my IAS vendors is that they join Commonwealth. Certainly you can do that through Zen as a service adopter. Go ahead and get individual access services up and working. Take advantage of the existing TEFCA data exchange because that is mandatory response. There's some 1,600 individual participants listed under TEFCA. And you also get the benefit of the Commonwealth participants that may not be in TEFCA yet, but that are participating in responding to IAS queries in the Commonwealth network. So that's my advice for right now, if that's keeping you up at night. All right, we are 8 minutes away, so I'm going to do last questions. All right, I think that we have hopefully given you plenty of things to think about. We will be sharing the slide deck, the call recording, and we do this monthly. So my next office hours, which will be towards the end of May, unless something happens, we have invited Peter, who is a solution specialist with ID.me, and they work with IAS vendors to do the proper ILA2 required identity validation. And a lot of people have questions on that process and how they go about doing it if they're interested in adopting the IAS use case. And so that will be a great session. It'll be fun to have a guest host on next time. All right. Thank you, everyone. Great to have you on the call with me this week, and hopefully we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.